What is social system mapping? In this video, I'll explain what it is and its purpose, and then in a subsequent video, I'll share the theory behind why we think social system mapping can be transformative. So, introducing social system mapping. Social system mapping it's basically a synthesis of several different kinds of maps. The foundation of it is a social network map, recognizing that the core drivers of all social system change or system stability comes from the actors in the system. Whether those are individuals or groups of individuals, the actors and the relationships among them are what we start with. Then, on top of that foundation, we include dimensions that you'd find in other kinds of system maps, like an asset map or a system map, a stakeholder or positional analysis kind of map, or a concept map. So, a social system map has a lot in common with all of those different kinds of maps. It looks very similar to any of them in that there will be nodes and lines connecting them. And so visually, you might look at it and think, yeah, I've got this. This is familiar to me. But a social system map can be misleading because while it's visually similar, content-wise, it's different. Because each of those other kinds of maps is generally looking at one layer or one dimension of the system at a time, such as causal loops or where the assets are, or just focusing on the social relationship structures. So those maps are essentially one sort of slice or one sort of layer into a social system, only showing one kind of relationality at a time. They're also almost always static, so they're just a snapshot in time of the system as it exists when the map is created. But a social system map is far more complex. It includes all of those dimensions and more. It includes more types of relationships, not just who knows who, but also things like who has access to what resources, who belongs to which subgroups, who supports which strategies or is impacted by which decisions, who's able to cause which impacts, and who has life experience or expertise in various areas. A social system map can also change over time. It's not a one-shot deal. We can continue to add new members and new dimensions to the map. We can ask members to update their information regularly. And so while it may look similar on the surface, it's actually richer and messier and more robust in terms of the ways that we can interrogate the data that we've gathered and the ways that we can sense make into and with the specific social ecosystem that we've mapped. A social system map also lives online. It's interactive so that members of the network can dig into the map based on their own needs and interests. It's usually made to be accessible to everyone in a network. It's iterative, emergent, and dynamic. So we like to think of it as an ongoing collective practice. It's much more of a process than a product. If we treat it like a product, if we think that we're just going to make this project, we're going to hit an endpoint, and then it will be done, and everyone will spontaneously start using it to get their needs met, it's not going to deliver. The value of a social system map comes from the ongoing collective practice of deciding what reality we want to understand, inquire into, and represent. It's the shared learning supported by the map, how to see from one another's perspectives, discovering things that we wouldn't be able to see without having a map that shows us how things are connected, and exploring the implications of those discoveries together, surfacing hidden alignments as well as hidden tensions, having conversations that we might not otherwise realize are needed. That ongoing and deepening collective practice is what delivers the benefit of the social system map, not the map itself. And it's not a one-and-done event. It's an ongoing and evolving praxis that both informs and is informed by an iterative, emergent, dynamic social system map. So why then do we do social system mapping? The whole point of doing this kind of mapping is to support systemic transformation. So as we develop the social system mapping methodology, and as we're working with our maps, our intention is to support a global movement that's already underway, that's happening all over the globe, to shift from systems of dominance and exploitation and extraction to systems of connection and reverence and regeneration. Those systems may have to do with the environment, with social justice, with economics, healthcare, education, governance, and so on. We practice social system mapping in support of those who are working to shift all of those human systems from being problematic and destructive to being regenerative. And among the things that we've learned in the last 20 to 30 years as systems thinking and complexity thinking has become more used in change initiatives, we've come to understand that there are a couple of conditions necessary for supporting systemic transformation. The first of those conditions is strong cross-contextual networks. And the second condition is that those networks include and are led by wise change agents. And so in this shift from systems of dominance to systems of connection, I like to say that there are two pathways or two kinds of capacities that are needed for this shift. And the first one I like to call the relational shift. That's the network weaving part. This is a shift from operating as separate, isolated, standalone, individualistic agents to a more porous, more collective, more connected and interdependent sense of self and understanding of agency. This is the relational shift, connecting, building trust and belonging, including everyone who is impacted or impactful, mutual support, contributing to a larger whole. We can't get far without really developing this relational capacity throughout our networks. The other shift that I like to talk about is what I call the cognitive shift, which means moving from a mechanistic sort of top-down command and control button-pushing 10-step plan kind of understanding of how systems work and how to cause change to a more open, more dimensional, more complex and multi-causal understanding, ultimately developing what we call a living systems or complexity mindset, increasing our capacity to make a difference in volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous living systems. So there are these two fundamental shifts that need to happen to support that higher level shift from systems of dominance, extraction, and exploitation to systems of connection, reverence, and regeneration. We might call these the heart shift and the mind shift. But you might ask, aren't those really just different perspectives of the same thing? Why separate out the heart and the mind when we're still just one being? Why complicate things by separating them out like that? Why not keep it simple? And they're right. It is essentially all one big, complex, interwoven transformation in terms of mindset, understanding, and how we interact with the world. But we find most of us tend to focus developing capacity on either one or the other of these two areas. Some are drawn to the heart shift and others to the mind shift. But we need to connect the two and keep them in a constant feedback loop where each informs and strengthens the other. If we're just looking at our efforts predominantly from just one of these angles, we're going to obscure understanding and possibilities that we'd see if we also looked at it from the other angle on a regular basis, going back and forth and back and forth. Social system mapping can help us work on both of these dimensions together. We're developing stronger relationships as well as increasing our cognitive capacity within complexity. All of that happens through the ongoing praxis of social system mapping in the context that people care deeply about. So it's shared learning that's applied and is relevant to the work at hand. We design and explore and unpack things together so that while we're mapping, we're also building relationships and shared insight. It ultimately becomes much more meaningful and a deeper and more mutually supportive kind of learning. The practice itself builds trust as well as understanding that leads to much wiser as well as more courageous action.